Welcome to this week's Master Coaches Weekly Buzz, hosted by the infamous John Foreman, who diligently taken on this for too many weeks. We continue to update our viewers on the most current issues and trends during our conversations with leaders in the sport. Our Journey of the Legends series continues providing great insight while you travel through their experiences. Now let's go to former Long Beach State head coach Brian Gimmillaro, who will introduce the second Journey of the Legends special guest today. Brian?
Thank you, Ruth. First, let's talk about the Master Coaches. Let me introduce our panel. First is Bob Bertucci. A little about Bob is he's been the head coach at Tennessee, West Point, Rutgers, Temple, Lehigh, and currently the men's coach at Sacred Heart. He's on a tour right now doing camps, summer camps. Next, go back to Ruth. Ruth Nelson started with at George Williams. The LSU, Iowa was the assistant coach of the national team, and now is the organizer, CEO of BYOP, which is a young youth development program. Now, by the way, all of the master coaches have had at least 40 years of coaching experience, which brings me to our fourth master coach who we're interviewing today. And this is Mick Haley. Mick Haley started out at Kellogg Community College, where he won several championships, went on to the University of Texas and won the national championship, became our Olympic coach, then went to USC and won a couple more national championships. Hi, Mick. Welcome.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, I have a very serious question to start out. Getting to know you, and through you, I got to know your wife, Carrie. And after getting to know her, I have a serious question a lot of people would like to know. And that is, who knows more about volleyball, Carrie or you?
Well, I'm sure she does, because she watches about 6 matches at a time in a normal season, and I can't handle that. She's got 2 or 3 iPads, 2 TVs, a cell phone or 2, and she knows it all. She is one of the best volleyball watchers, and is very, very knowledgeable. And, you know, when I used to coach and I would lose once in a while, I'd come home, and that was always a real test, because I got 20 questions real quick on why I didn't do this, why I didn't do that, why didn't you smile this time? You know, it's been tough.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I felt the same way, and I didn't know if you would agree. Mick, you've been away from this game for a little bit, not away from the game, but away from head coaching. And after all that success, after stepping away for a few years, what do you think now? Do you think you could be coaxed out of retirement? Do you think a right job could come along to get you away from the volleyball you're doing now and into this coaching seat again?
I think in a heartbeat, absolutely. Actually, I was just getting good. When I finished, I really was. I mean, my gym was so good. My assistant coaches were so good. We had this down to a science in all facets of the coaching. And honestly, it didn't matter who was on the team. We felt we had a chance to win the championship every year. And that's really the disappointing thing, because once you get all the ducks in a row and you get everything absolutely the way you want it, and you think you understand exactly what you want to do with that group of people, it's pretty exciting to know that you just handle the things as they come along. If you handle them well, you have a chance to win.
I do think, by the way, I agree with you. I think we get better as we go. I think we become better, and I think good coaches become better, and you certainly are that. Now let's talk a little bit about, if you wanted people to know, what's the legacy? What is Mick Haley's legacy? What do you want people to remember you for, and what message do you want to give people about your legacy?
Well, mine was always to dream. If I could dream, I felt like I could do it. I dreamed about a lot of things, and honestly, we did most of those things. If you can dream about it, attitude, effort, enthusiasm, those are the three things. And you got to have a dream, and you've got to have something inside of you that just never lets you stop trying to make something better. I'm sure I drove all my players crazy because I was never satisfied with where we were. It's how much better you could be. And underachieving was never acceptable. Just couldn't allow that for myself, my assistants, our schools, anybody around us. So that's kind of where I've come from. That's what I've tried to do. And I'll just share this one quick story. I was sitting at the banquet, ABCA banquet in 1987, and we had just lost to Stanford in the Final Four in Indianapolis. And there was some coaches sitting at the table, and they said to me, "What do you think about next year?" And I said, "I think we're going to win next year." And sure enough, 1988 rolled around. We had the two big wins there in Minneapolis, won the national championship. And I got this letter from this coach. She said, "I have to apologize." She said, "I was sitting with you a year ago. You told me you were going to win." And she said, "I really thought you were full of hot air. I really didn't believe that you guys could do that." And she said, "I apologize. That was a wonderful thing to witness and to to be able to watch for a year." So I just think people need to dream, and then you need to go after your dream and execute and see if you can make it happen.
Well, I was going to ask you things like about if you were at Texas, what color mask would you wear this year, or USC? I thought maybe you could wear a tan mask. It kind of looked like that burgundy and tan, almost like a bottle of wine. Or if you were real loyal at Texas, you could wear that burnt orange mask. But I'll let that go for now. Instead, I admire that answer, by the way, that you just gave. To dream as a coach, to create dreams in players is a great thing, and I'm impressed that you felt that way. But I'm going to turn it over to Bob next. Bob Bertucci.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, Mick, we've known each other for a long time, a real long time, in a lot of different capacities. One of the things I'm interested in, and I hear coaches say this all the time, I've made the comment myself, the athletes have changed over our lifetime as coaches. We've all recognized that. I mean, I actually think society is changing. But with that being said, any part of your philosophy that has been tried and true, as you've gone, through these changes with athletes?
Well, certainly the whole spectrum of coaching, from when I started, it was athletes would do anything you say because they wanted a chance to compete. And from that, we've gone through years and years of more competitions, better facilities, better transportation, better food, all of these things, until the athletes have gotten to the point where they've played so many games of volleyball by the time they get to college is they're not sure what they want to do. They all say they want to win. They all say a lot of things, but getting back to where the game, where you can guarantee that you can win all the time, is when you get your fundamental skills so well developed and you can control the ball so well that you really can dominate for a long time, because a lot of teams can't be that disciplined. And the athletes have changed in that regard. They're not as hungry to win. They're not as disciplined anymore. They've played maybe too much volleyball. So you really have to think in not defensively, but offensively. And this is not just our sport. I watch this in every sport. Basketball has gone to a completely creative offensive game. Other sports have got to emphasize offense, points scored, all the things that give you a lot of attention. And yet, when it comes to winning, what do they talk about? Your defense, your discipline on defense. The NBA is back to that now. I can remember a time when the NBA went through where we are, where everybody just wanted to hit the ball on the floor. They didn't want to go to the floor. They didn't want to wear knee pads. They just wanted to block and hit, and that's all they did. But it constantly changes, and you can't stay where you were. I've been forced by the players to change constantly as I've gone through my evolution, simply because it does change. At first, it was all about just trying to get them to be excited and give their very best effort. Then it was about getting them good enough techniques to control the ball. Then it was about understanding how you win the game and controlling the ball and being excited. And then we got into the rally score, where certain things have to happen, and you pretty much know how you're going to win the game. The real question is, how are you going to get your team to score enough points to do that, and how are you going to keep the other team from scoring points, too many points to beat you? And so it's evolved that way. And so how you deal with the players is a lot different. And if you try to stay the same, it's not going to work. I couldn't coach like I did in the 70s now and be successful. And that's why I say I just gotten good enough to really have a chance to win every year. And I'm just a slow learner. It took me all that time to figure it out.
Okay, here's another one for you. Looking at the college game, all right. I know we have probably a number of college coaches watching the show right now. What do you think about recruiting in the college game right now? I mean, you were one of the top recruiters in the country.
Well, I think it's sure a waste of time. Honestly, think about it. If we put as much time into teaching our kids and talking to our kids about how to be good teammates and how to be successful, and as we do, putting in the time to recruit, certainly the product I would expect to be a much higher product, much better. On the other hand, it's competitive out there, so you have to recruit. So you have to accept recruiting as a part of it. But I'm wondering, the women's game is controlled by scholarships. That's why the women's game exists, is everybody's fighting for one of those scholarships. And that's why you asked me about recruiting. But let's say it was on merit to go to college and that sort of thing. Would the game have the interest we have now? We wouldn't be recruiting as much because maybe we wouldn't have the budget to do that. Recruiting is really dictated by a lot of things, the rules, of course, but if you have, just to give you an example, I prided myself on being the first one in the gym at every one of the qualifiers early in the morning. I get there at 7:05. You get there at 7, everybody's lined up to get in the convention center. But at 7:05, I'm in the gym, and I'm around to every court that I know the team that I want to see one of those players play sees me there first. And then Dave Shondell was trying to figure out how the heck I was winning the recruiting battle with him. And he started watching. He started trying to beat me in that facility at 7:03 in the morning. And a number of other coaches started doing that. And pretty soon we had coaches meetings at 7:20 because everybody was in the facility, even if they didn't know who they wanted to see. Way back when Chris Bigelow was my recruiting coordinator, and she was one of the best here at Texas, she would send me on wild goose chase to courts where we weren't recruiting anybody because Rudy Samora, who was coaching at San Diego State, would really just follow me around to find out who I was looking at because he knew we had a great recruiting system and we found athletes. And then he would know where the athletes were, and you would only have to put in one eighth of the time that we put in to try to find the kids. So Bigelow figured this out, and she sent me on wild goose chases to different courts. Rudy never could figure out who I was looking at, and he was shaking his head because there were not any athletes there that he would want to recruit. And that's the only way we accommodated that. But recruiting is, it has its great stories. It's an awful lot of time spent. And honestly, when I recruit somebody that I really want and I don't get them, that is the biggest hurt ever. Because when I recruit somebody, I can see within myself where I think they can be and how good they can be. It's not just a number. It's a person that I see that can make a big thing happen in our sport. And I dream about how good they could be. I dreamed about how good Bricio could be, and Viviana Candelas, and Sammy Duarte, and a lot of these kids that we looked at and we wanted to be good, and then they became good. But a lot of them I didn't get. You don't get all the recruits, and you got to have a tough skin, because if you sulk around, you'll lose more of them.
Well, I was going to ask you as my next question, what's the funniest recruiting story? But I can't wait to see Rudy Sawara again and talk about the one you just told us.
Well, Rudy will admit to that, I think.
Well, what was probably your most memorable moment as a coach, whether it was a particular championship or whatever?
Well, it's actually a lot of them. You know, you have a lot of dreams. And I dreamed that we could be the first. I dreamed that we could win a national championship in Texas. And we did in the second year, the AIAW National Championship. And that's the first year the NCAA started. And my athletic director, Donna Lopiano, was president of the AIAW. So you know why I played in the AIAW. I didn't have a choice. And but we had played USC that year and beaten them at the UCLA Invitational. And Chuck Irby was the coach there, and they had won the first NCAA National Championship that same year. But I called him up and said, Chuck, I just want you to know we're the mythical national champs overall, because we beat you this year, and we both are the winners of the two respective tournaments. And he wasn't very pleased with that at all. And incidentally, Brian, I have to go back to a quick story that I have to tell you about Donald Lopiano, because when I first went to Texas, you asked me about the color. And I thought the color was just needed something, okay? Burnt orange and white. So I, thinking that I could make a difference, I suggested we put Columbia blue, like you had at Tennessee, Bob, only with the darker orange. And I got this letter from Dr. Lopiano saying, bastardization of university colors will henceforth cease. And that was my answer to that suggestion. So there are some things that are sacred, including the eyes of Texas, as you've recently been reading. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Mick, I'm going to ask you one more question before I bounce it over to Ruth. I know we have some international coaches, on the show, watching the show. How about telling us a little bit of the difference between the college game and the international game, since you've been heavily involved in both?
Well, honestly, I love the international game. I love the international coaches. One of the reasons is because they looked at the game differently. In fact, even when I first went to USC and Billy Ferguson was the men's coach there, he said, "You coach different." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You just see it differently." And I didn't know what he meant by that, but he was really kind of raised in the Southern California volleyball mecca, and everybody kind of coached the same there. Well, when I first went internationally, I was a fish out of water. I did not understand how these guys were manipulating their teams to play at that level and how they were doing things. In some cases with athletes that even weren't as good as the athletes we had. And so I had to really watch carefully, and I really appreciated. You had to be very careful. In fact, one night we went around, we knocked on all the doors of all the coaches. I think we were in Kuala Lumpur. And we got the Cuban coach out of bed. We got the Chinese coach out of bed. We got them all out. And I bought everybody a round of beer, and we started trying to communicate. And I learned through broken English and trying to understand Spanish and a few other things. I learned so much more about volleyball. Karpol was really fun, the Russian coach, because he wouldn't be telling you anything, but yet if you paid attention between the lines, he was actually teaching you. And that's kind of the way Jim Coleman was. I think that's why he loved the international games so much. So there's a lot of things. I learned more from watching the coaches than I did communicating with them. But I really think that we have a lot to learn, and certainly they asked me a lot of questions, and my staff a lot of questions about what we were doing. We weren't so good at that time, but we ended up being one of the top 4 teams in the world, and maybe with a little luck could have been in the finals for the Olympic gold. So yeah, I think a lot of the Olympic coaches, and I think that we can learn different ways to approach training and some other things. Right now, they like the way USA teams are training, and they're copying a lot of things we do, but they keep thinking and they keep creating new things, and you want to keep watching, because there are all kinds of things people come up with that are positive, that make the game better.
That's great, Mick. Well, I know Ruth is chomping at the bit here because she has a bunch of questions for us. So, Ruth, why don't you take it over?
Oh, Bob, thank you for giving me 30 seconds to ask my question.
I told you I had questions this time.
I know. And Mick, you are typical because you ended up taking 2 of my questions I had, so I still have some. My biggest question is, did you wear a burnt orange blazer when you were interviewed at Texas in 1980?
I did not, but you guess who did?
Yes, I did.
Had a burnt orange coat, a burnt orange tie, burnt orange patent leather shoes, burnt orange socks. Marv Dumpy and Sue Gazansky were the other 2 people there applying for the job along with me, and we looked at each other, and Dumpy says, let's find a basketball and go shoot hoops, because we're not winning this one. And that was the epitome of somebody telling Texas that they wanted the job. Irby was very aggressive, and I understood from comments that Dumpy told me later, I think it was Mark, that Irby was all upset because I was making the committee laugh in there, and he hadn't made the committee laugh, and he thought that was important, that the committee thought I was either funny or enjoyed my conversation. So that was the strangest interview ever.
That really wasn't my question. Okay, I think of this. You've been inducted into 4 Hall of Fames. AVCA, USA Volleyball, Southern California, and Junior College, which we didn't put that on there. You were the Coach of the Year, Olympic coach, AIW. We're going to take you back as if I were hypnotizing you. We're going back to 1980. Okay, we're not going back to your junior college. We're going back to 1980. You were hired at Texas. And lo and behold, you are part of an all-women's championship group. Association Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, which was really, to be honest with you, Final Four. Nobody even knows that AIW existed. It was NCAA. In 1981, you won the last AIW National Championship with a record of 60 wins, 6 losses, and 1 tie. Well, who ever heard of a tie anymore? Okay, so tell me, that's 66, well, we'll say 67 because it was a tie. And now, before you left Texas, you were only 31 matches. What was it like to compare 67 matches to 31? Even though there were 2 out of 3s, you still played a lot.
Yeah, and in this situation with COVID, we might get back to something like that, because when you traveled, you wanted to play. So when we went someplace, there were usually 6 to 8 teams, and you played round-robin matches of 2 out of 3, and then you had quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. So if you didn't get 6 matches every Saturday, sometimes you would go and play 2 or 3 matches Friday night and then 6 matches Saturday, and we took on all challengers with that group. I had 2 of my community college kids transfer with me from Kellogg to Texas in 80, and in 81 they were seniors, and my senior setter, Sally Slowbaum, was the Broderick Award winner that year, and Jenny Hayes was one of the finest middles ever played the game, quick and dynamic, and we were trying to get out there and play, and I just about killed them with all the play and the travel because we loaded into vans. We never flew. We only flew, I think, one time, and that was when we went to the Final Four in Florida State is where we went. And yeah, Cecile wasn't there yet. I don't think, maybe she was, but they had that guy beating that drum down there. That guy is still there, I think, beats that drummer for all of the Seminole matches. Yeah. But that's the only time we flew. Everything else were vans that we drove. So we played a lot of volleyball, and we really enjoyed it. I mean,
and not very many injuries.
No, and that's another thing. Not very many injuries at all. We did have Trink Darnseifer had a knee. That was one player we lost, but we didn't have a lot of injuries. We hit a lot of balls. We played a lot, but I don't think the velocity was as great during that time. And you know, when you start going for speed and velocity, that's when you start having injuries. So.
All right. Hey, that's great. Hey, Brian, you're on. And I didn't get to answer all my questions. Yes. Yeah. I
can go back.
To thank this young man.
No, Nick, I just, getting to know you and the other master coaches doing our clinics has been a lot of fun for me and enjoyable. Yeah. And so in closing, Mick, what would you like to direction of the sport? What would you like to see? Where would you like to see it go?
Yeah,
there was something in the
yeah. That's a great question. I would really like to see us get away from politics of RPIs and things like that. I'd like to get back to being creative with our systems, allowing the kids to be a little bit more creative, being able to play out of conference and all over. You know, the thing that I enjoyed most when I was at Kellogg Community College, and I would never have left Kellogg had they not formed the NC2A and all that. We played all four-year schools when I was at Kellogg. We hardly ever played junior colleges. And I told the story the other day when we played Michigan State all the time. We would get ahead of them, and then Kathy DeBoer would get so angry she would take over the match and beat us 17-15 in the third set every time. And it was amazing. And those were really fun times. But we put ourselves in such a box right now that we're afraid to try things. When I went fast at SC after going high and slow, and I was high and slow for a reason. I knew exactly how to win with that system, and I knew other teams didn't train discipline-wise for that, and our mantra was defense, so we could be methodical. And then people got really bored with that. I didn't get bored with it. We were winning 75% of our games, so why not stay with it? But we went fast, and that was fun, and I had played fast when I played with Coleman and Kenneth Allen, so yeah, I'd like to see the game continue to evolve, and I'd like to see us spend a little less time recruiting, a little bit more time teaching in the gym. And I do think we could spend a little bit more time in the gym, and it wouldn't be negative to the student-athlete. I'd like to see the student-athletes kind of push for that so they could get better and become as good as they could really be.
Well, Mick, we've run out of time, but thank you very much. I appreciate listening to your insights. And I'm going to turn it back because we're going to do another one of our 4 coaches next week. So Ruth, would you close us up, please?
Yes. The special guest next week is Coach Bob. Yeah, he's our special guest. But we have a special shout out to all those coaches that have attended one of our championship skills series. For those interested in Master Coaches virtual clinic this fall or an in-person clinic in 2021, please contact us at www.volleyballmastercoaches.com. Join us next week as we continue our journey of the legends and interview and interrogate Coach Bob. And follow us on Volleyball Master Coaches on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, VB Master Coaches. And all of our weekly Buzz shows are on YouTube. And you may access these by going directly to our Instagram account, VB Master Coaches. Click on the link in our bio and enjoy listening to leaders in our sport. Now, let's go to our very, very, very special host, John Foreman, who will update us on his upcoming coaching conversations and update us on his journey to Buffalo.
Well, thanks, Ruth. I'm out of quarantine in Buffalo, so things have turned up. This week on Friday, I've got the first coaching conversation that I've had in a little bit. It's going to be a third time around with David Gill from Vert. He's the Performance Lab Director. He's done a series of conversations with teams around the country, talking with players about how they can prepare themselves for preseason, assuming, of course, that they have a preseason. So I'm actually going to do a two-part session with him where for about the first 30 minutes, we're going to talk about that sort of stuff. I'm going to have a couple of my players from Madai that are going to be on that he can interact with. They can learn from him about what they should do over the next few weeks. And then the second half will be more coach-focused, what we should do in the early part of preseason to help these players ramp themselves back up physically to get ready for the season ahead. So it should be an interesting conversation. You can go to coachingvb.com for details or follow up on at coachingvb to get the details on Twitter. So thanks, everybody, for turning up, and we'll see you again next week.
Oh, yeah, man.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bob, we can't wait.